Hey people, welcome to the Run Testers, and in this latest video breaking down the best running watches you can buy right now, we're looking at high-end running watches from each of the big brands including Garmin, COROS, Polar and Suunto. We're going to be talking about top of the range watches here. That tends to mean devices with the best specs, biggest battery lives, along with the most comprehensive suites of features for training, navigation and smartwatch tools. Now, many of these premium running watches pack bigger, higher quality screens. They also have the latest sensors and hardware, more rugged build with ramped up durability. Often they're using more premium materials like sapphire crystal displays and titanium or aluminium cases to be more resilient, but also to give them a more stylish finish and to offset the size in a bid to stay lighter on the wrist. These are the watches that increasingly come with eye-watering price tags too. We're talking running watches costing north of £500 generally, and some getting perilously close to £1,000. Now, we've tested and considered names you might recognise, from the Fenix, the Enduro from Garmin, to the Vantage V3 and the Girt X2 Pro from Polar. The COROS Vertix 2S is in there, and I caught up with Run Testers Nick and Mike to get into the pros and cons and to pick our favourite. So watch on to find our top picks of the best high-end running watches. So we're going to kick off with the Garmin's, and in this we've got the Garmin Enduro 3, we've got the Garmin Fenix 8 with all its myriad options between solar and AMOLED, and we've got the Garmin Forerunner 965. Nick, do you want to kick us off with the first of these? Let's have a look at the Fenix 8 to begin with. Why has this one made it to the list? And I guess we should address the fact that there are lots of different options within this category as well.
Yeah, I think we've all tested the Fenix 8 AMOLED. There are 3 different sizes. We actually all tested the largest size, I think, but you're getting a similar experience across the AMOLED ranges, and then the solar ranges probably are more similar to the Fenix 7 Pro and the Enduro 3, but with all Garmin's in this high-end category, you're getting some features here that you just don't get from other watches, and Garmin has been, I think, quite dominant in the high-end category for quite a while as a result, because it has, I think, the best navigation tools, got exceptional maps with loads of nifty features like Climb Pro. You're getting really intensive training analysis, which is the same across these 3 Garmin's, and then the Fenix 8 then stands out by having a mic and speaker and a dive-proof design, new user interface that you're also getting on the Enduro 3, but not on the Forerunner 965, I don't think. It's kind of an in-between an old Forerunner and a Fenix software. But yeah, the Fenix 8 is the top watch in the line now with the AMOLED or the non-AMOLED option with those extra smartwatch features. And that's basically what Garmin is creating with the Fenix, I think, is they're aiming for the ultimate watch, the watch that can do everything. You've got the best sports tracking they offer, the best navigation, the best training analysis, the best smart features they offer, all in one watch at an incredibly high price, but you're getting everything. And it does stand apart, I think, from the crowd within the sport watch arena because of that. It's just whether it stands apart enough to justify, spending the extra on it compared to other high-end watches or even older watches.
We have picked this as one of our best watches of the year, so clearly it's a standout. But Mike, within that kind of feature package, what is it that you think sets it truly apart from the watches like the Enduro or the Forerunner 965?
I think it's fundamentally giving you the best of what Garmin has to offer. That's ultimately, and if that is what you want from a running watch, then ultimately this is the watch that's going to give it to you. And I think we've spoken about the fact that, with this move to AMOLED displays, that compromise you ultimately may think you're kind of making on kind of fully fledged smartwatches that have AMOLED displays. You're not really making that with the Garmin Fenix 8. And if you are going for the solar charging version as well, what we're seeing with that is that, Garmin is able to kind of, enhance and improve the ability of that technology as well too. So there's innovation happening in the Fenix range as well as kind of consolidating what it's already done very well in its Fenix watches, giving you that very good core experience, but ultimately making sure that you're not making a lot of compromises here, and that's ultimately why it's kind of really stood out for us.
I suppose, and then the step up on something like the Forerunner 965 is the design. You're getting this steel or titanium watch, a really rugged watch with a sapphire screen if you get the sapphire model, and it's heavier, it's bigger, but it gives you that more adventure-proof watch. And then compared to the Enduro 3, Garmin hasn't brought the smarts to that, and you don't necessarily get quite the top-end experience of the Fenix 8 while still getting a top-end experience, but it's almost like Garmin is trying to give you those 3 options, and the Enduro 3 then extends the battery life a little bit, although the Fenix 8 is pretty much a monster on that front as well. But yeah, it's like 3 little niches within these high-end watches for Garmin. You've got the lightweight 965, that's a bit cheaper, much lighter, much smaller, very geared up for lots of sport, and then the more adventurous Fenix and Enduro, and then the Fenix then adds in all those smarts as well, I guess.
At times when you're actually sit down to kind of review this and you go through the list of features and how comprehensive it is for the Fenix 8, there is so much that you could kind of test and compare. For me, the standout thing for the Fenix 8 was getting battery life that you're not sacrificing too much for that AMOLED display, which has always been a bit of a consideration for me. But running them side by side, I had the Enduro 3 and the Fenix 8 AMOLED 51mm. There wasn't really that much difference in terms of the sort of weekly training drop-off. Now, if we move on to the Enduro, I think one thing I do like about the Enduro is the sort of slightly more lightweight build. That it just feels a little bit more comfortable on the wrist if you're looking for all of those kind of mapping and navigation. You're looking for that kind of full suite of tools outside of the smartwatch tools, but you want something that's kind of lighter and slightly more easy to wear 24/7 with a little bit of extra battery life. That's where the Enduro really has the appeal for me. I don't personally necessarily have to have the AMOLED screen. I think it's a really nice to have. So if you're willing to forego that and you don't mind having some of the extra smartwatch smarts, the voice activation, the voice tools, the voice notes, all of that kind of stuff, then I think the Enduro at the price actually now kind of for me represents potentially the best value Garmin within this kind of top end bracket.
Yeah, I think Garmin did exactly what they needed to do with the Enduro line with the third version. They kind of listened to what people want. From the Enduro, people want that battery life. They want a rugged but ideally lightweight design. They're not looking for smarts. I think they could even go further with the Enduro 4 and strip out music entirely and things like that and just really focus on, maps, battery life, accuracy, reliability in tough conditions. And then they brought the price down, which you just don't see anywhere, watches, certainly not with the Fenix 8. So, yeah, I think the Enduro 3 was a real win for the year for Garmin because it did all those things, which is the right things to do for that line, and actually now makes it different to the Fenix, where I think the previous model was kind of, it's like the Fenix 7X Plus, now it's different.
And then obviously we've got quite a drop down to the Garmin Forerunner 965 in terms of price. Mike, what kind of things would people be buying the 965 for over and above the other two?
I think fundamentally what you're looking at 965, and we've talked about design, and it's, if you are not the kind of person that wants this kind of big hulking watch on your wrist, but you want the functionality of a Fenix or an Enduro, that's ultimately what you're getting. You're obviously getting the AMOLED display. It was one of the first Garmin Forerunner watches to have an AMOLED display as well too. And despite it being an older watch, it still very much kind of holds up, and I think will hold up for a lot of people in terms of the level of training and the amount of, they're going to be using this watch. It's giving you that good mix of smartwatch and sports watch and running watch functionality. Now it is running on slightly older software, which we're now seeing on the new Fenix and the Enduro 3, and fundamentally won't be rolled back. But I don't think in essence you are going to be, or a lot of people are going to be missing much from what we're seeing from those changes with those two watches. And I think if you wanted things like mapping and navigation that you're going to get on those more expensive watches, an AMOLED display, very good core run tracking experience, and that kind of mix of smartwatch and sports watch, and that's kind of what the 965 is going to give you in a slightly less durable design, but ultimately at probably a more likable price. That's fundamentally is going to probably be a lot more affordable going forward as well too.
So you're sacrificing the screen's not quite as durable as you'll find on the Fenix 8 and the Enduros, right? But you'll also sacrifice quite a chunk in battery life. I think the max accuracy battery life for the Forerunner 965 is 19 hours in that mode. So it's a big drop actually. That's I think for me it's one of the major sacrifices if you're going to come down to this. I do think for some people this will be a watch that has a styling that will appeal more to them than the kind of big hench, kind of rugged looks of the adventure watches. And I think it's actually a really good looking watch. It's one of my favourite within the Forerunner range. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I love this watch. And I would say on the battery life drop off, I think that really differentiates it between them, because I think if you're looking at day-to-day use, the 965 lasts pretty good. It's like 6 or 7 days as an AMOLED watch. It's that single activity where probably you're expecting the people who are looking at those ultras to be looking at the more rugged watches that then have that single activity, massive time, even in the most accurate mode like the Enduro and the Fenix. And that's kind of different. The Forerunner 965 feels much more like, more a marathoner's watch, doing lots of training. You want a lightweight watch. It's still got the biggest screen, the same size screen in a small design. I love it. It's probably the one I prefer out of all of them because it is so lightweight and I have skinny wrists and stuff like that. But yeah, and what you'd lose, you do lose on that single activity, but day-to-day, the battery life drop-off is still there because the Enduro and the Fenix 8 now last so long. But for the size of watch, you get a pretty good kind of day-to-day amount of use out of it. And just really, it feels like a road runner's watch. I have scratched the screen running an Ultra Fit, or I did venture onto the trails with it, but only a little scratch and it's still usable. But you do sacrifice that kind of thing with it, but you get a much lighter watch that's easier to sleep with, for sure.
So that's the Garmin's. We've also got two Polars on this list. We have got the Polar Vantage V3, which was the first Polar to bring an AMOLED screen, and then we've got the Polar Girt X2 Pro, obviously a slightly more rugged design. Essentially what you're getting with these two watches is the same suite of software and features and tracking across kind of your training performance, navigation, and the kind of slightly limited sort of smartwatch tools that you'll get. You're just differentiating these by the design, the build, the materials, and the battery life. So, Mike, give us a quick run through of how you kind of split these two up if people are thinking about them.
Well, I think you kind of mentioned it there. I think which is good actually, and what we're seeing in Polar's range, particularly this year, is that it's really trying to offer a consistent software experience across its watches, which I think, you know, that is something that you want to see. You want to see as much as you see in that kind of cheaper watch that you do in these kind of more high, you know, expensive high-end watches. So, you know, it's playing a bit of catch up ultimately in terms of the competition. So, you know, we're finally getting kind of mapping support we've kind of wanted from these watches. You're obviously getting the AMOLED display there as well too, and ultimately giving you that, as we talked about, that battery life that, you know, feels like it's worth having an AMOLED display and you're not having you charging it on a regular basis. I think a lot of things that Polar is doing really well outside of its kind of core run tracking experience, which is very good and very solid overall. I think we've all kind of shared a very good experience with it. Is that it's starting to look a little bit more, you know, from a training analysis point of view, looking in terms of recovery, you know, looking a little bit more on sleep. I think for me, it's probably the most reliable in terms of sleep tracking. You know, no device is perfect from that point of view, but I think in terms of running watches, I found for me personally, the sleep tracking has been very good. And in terms of using that information to guide you in terms of, you know, recommendations, you know, there's a lot happening from the training analysis point of view. I think ultimately you are just looking at the designs from these two watches. As I said, it's very much about having that consistent experience from a software point of view, and the performance as well too. You're obviously getting that new Elixir kind of sensor array, which for me, I don't think it's quite delivered that, you know, upping in kind of performance overall. But I think in terms of it bringing in new metrics that Polar can look at from a day-to-day basis and allow that to inform what you know better and guide you in terms of what you should do and what your data might be telling you. I think, you know, it's a step in the right direction for Polar ultimately, and that's kind of what we've seen with the Vantage V3 and the kind of more rugged Girt X2 Pro.
And we've also got a little bit of boosted durability with the Girt X2 Pro. Obviously, it's built to be that kind of more rugged. In some ways, it's sort of designed to feel like a competitor to the Fenix 8, but maybe doesn't have that kind of full capacity or full capability that watch does. Nick, if you're thinking about the differences between these two, what are the preferences that you've found within the Vantage V3 or the Polar Girt X2 Pro that would sort of make you choose one of these above the other?
Yeah, it is really that difference in design. It's a bit like the Forerunner 965 versus the Fenix 8. You've got that lighter Vantage. I think it's a nice design for me. It's not so chunky on the wrist. It's maybe a little bit less durable, but it's still, you know, pretty long. I've not had any problems with durability on the Polar. I think other than that kind of build quality and this little bit ticking battery life with the Girt X Pro, it's really very much the same experience, and that is a little bit, you know, a good thing. But I do think that is where Polar lacks a little bit in this high end category, is that it's a bit slightly tired. I think their user interface and their general software, I think, needs a bit of a refresh. It's just slightly awkward watches to use a little bit more than other brands, which are updating quite a lot quicker. I think they're releasing software updates, and there's just a lot of little things I find when I use a Polar watch that are just a little bit harder to do than on other sports watches. So I do think they need to catch up a little bit on that and refresh it a little bit. And like I say, I think I think they have now is they've really got the fundamentals in place now. The maps are there. They've now got accurate dual band GPS, which they didn't have when they introduced it with the Ignite line, and they've got, you know, an impressive backup software system that people have liked for a long time in Polar Float. I think they do need to refresh that as well a little bit though. But I do think they don't have all the features that Garmin are offering, and they are resolutely sticking to quite high prices at Polar, and I think that is their problem in this high-end category. Is if you go toe-to-toe with the Fenix 8 or, you know, even the Fenix 7, frankly, you've got to produce the goods, and I still think they're struggling on that front a little bit.
Other things, there are some features that I think that are quite unique to Polar that I really like. You know, I like the FuelWise fueling recommendations for sort of planning a racing strategy, particularly for Ultra. I think it kind of simplifies that process. I quite like Hill Splitter as a feature where you get to see your hill segments broken down after the event, to see your climb and descents and your speeds and that broken down. There are little bits of kind of unique kind of Polar features which I think are smattered in there, but overall it does feel they're a little bit lightweight, and I think that also translates over into the smartwatch tools. You know, there's no offline music, just got music controls, and there's just a few bits that at these price points you now kind of expect to have
Yeah, and the battery life is very good for single activities, but they polar watches just do drain fast outside those activities. So even if you can go and knock out one of these mega ultras you run, Kieran, you're still gonna have to charge it every 5, 6, 7 days. So it's that I think that longevity doesn't help with the kind of again comparisons to other brands, that's the hard thing of all these things. Like you're being compared to the very best watches in this price bracket, so it's hard.
There's one other thing which I've noticed as well, which I only spotted this time around. Polar, when you get to 9%, it stops you doing a workout, right?
Yeah, that's bad. That's really annoying.
Yeah, that's really annoying.
So you've already got 90% capacity, and it might be. I want to go back and ask them whether or not the battery life estimates are based on that 90% equals the amount they've claimed. Otherwise, you're just losing time. But anyway, that's a bit annoying. They kind of just slowly shut things down and stop you using it at a certain point.
9% on the Vertix 2 is like 3 or 4 days.
Well, yeah, but exactly. You could still go for long. So anyway, yeah. Speaking of the Vertix 2, we do have the COROS Vertix 2S on the list. Now, I think one of the main things about this when it first came out was we're thinking you're going to get a more compact Vertix, but the S doesn't mean small. What it probably means is that it's done a small step up from the Vertix 2. So it's pretty much the same watch.
We've lost Mike, Kieran. We've got to make that clear now. Mike's gone. He will not talk about these last 2 watches. He ran out of battery. Ironic, given the watch you're about to discuss, actually. He's out of battery. We can't record again. We've got to go.
I thought he threw his mic against the wall and just strolled out. He's done. Enough. 2 watches left to go. We've got the COROS Vertix 2S. We've got the Suunto Race coming up. The COROS Vertix 2S, I think one of the main things to say about this straight off the bat is when it first came out, the S we all thought was going to mean COROS was going to produce a slightly more compact, rugged watch, which I know a lot of people would actually like. They want some of the same features. They want the same rugged build, but in something that feels a bit lighter on the wrist. That is not what happened. The S kind of stands for, in my head, like a small step on from the COROS Vertix 2. But essentially what you're getting is pretty much the same with a few upgrades. Nick, what are those key upgrades that we've got?
Just a little accuracy boost, mainly in the GPS. The Vertix 2 was, I think, the first multiband watch we tested. Certainly the first one I tested. It seemed like it was going to be very exciting. Didn't really deliver the kind of GPS leap that I was hoping for. They then saw with things like Garmin watches and Suunto watches. And now Vertix 2S is a very accurate multiband watch on GPS. I think the heart rate accuracy was meant to improve as well. I didn't notice that so much in my testing. And other than that, you have pretty much the same kind of package. And that is one thing that COROS does across its whole range is you get the same kind of package in all of its watches. Really, like even right down to the Pace Pro and the Pace 3, you're going to get very similar kind of training analysis and software. It's just the Vertix 2S is the beast, the one that can survive in all conditions, take it up mountains, smash it repeatedly against rocks, and nothing will happen. And then mega battery life, right? I think, is this the most long lasting? It's tough. For me, it did outlast the Enduro in testing, but it's pretty close. But it's crazy long lasting, isn't it?
You'll get 43 hours for this in max accuracy mode, so it's not quite Enduro, but it's still really good. And if you put, it's one of those, if you stick it in a cupboard, it's got that Nokia thing where it just won't die. The other thing, the battery life actually does come down a little bit against the Vertix 2, which is interesting. They've lost a little bit. I think other things that aren't here, obviously there's offline mute, or something there is here, but there's offline music, but it's a bit of a faff. There's no support for Spotify or Deezer. If you're looking for those things, that's a bit of a question. There is no flashlight as well. So if you're thinking about being out there, it hasn't got that Garmin kind of Fenix sort of flashlight, but it's a solid kind of reliable watch for the most part. I really like it. It is definitely a step on for me from the Vertix 2, though again I think if you want, you can look back for deals with the Vertix 2 and you're probably not going to be that disappointed.
Yeah, I think it's it's a good one. I think what you're getting in terms of value with the Vertix 2S is incredible materials. Like, it does come in a bit cheaper than the other watches in this category, if you're looking at titanium sapphire models in particular, unless you find watches on a sale. And yeah, I just think it doesn't really offer the same full experience you get from Garmin in particular. You can certainly find previous models of the Fenix and that kind of thing at the same kind of price. That I think it's just a struggle here. I think COROS is much more competitive at the lower area, but this is a really good watch. It does the job. It's very hardy. It's long lasting. Like, again, this is one that on day-to-day battery life will just outlast other watches because it doesn't do so much in between activities. And it's a really good watch. Deserves its place in this category, but it's one that I think the full package isn't there to compete with Garmin. You've got maps, but the navigation tools aren't as good. You've got music, but you can't link it up to Spotify, like you say. It's like I always end up finding like albums from when I had digital files. So in my teens, it's like the Arcade Fire, like original album gets brought out to test and stuff like that. So not quite there on those kind of features, but there on accuracy, long lasting, and rugged design, I guess.
Last but not least, we have the Suunto Race, which I think in many ways out COROS and what it does. You know, it's come in with a really good all-round package. You know, AMOLED screen, dual frequency GPS. It's not the lightest watch, but it's got quite, you know, sort of nice sort of premium build, and it comes in at a really competitive price point, which is dropping even in the deals as we speak, which is making it even more, you know, difficult to dismiss. Again, it's not the most fully featured, it's not the most capable watch on this list. There are gaps. The UI, I think, for the software, it's not as smooth or as easy to use as some of the other devices, but when you start to factor in the price and what you're getting, turning this watch down is becoming more and more difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, we gave Suunto, like, they didn't win Brand of the Year or get runner-up in our recent awards, but they got a nod because they just brought out really cheap, amazing watches. And it's like the thing that we've been crying out for brands to do is, like, you can't go toe-to-toe with Garmin on features because they've been doing it for a lot longer and they're just nailing all these features. So you need to pick some features, the essentials, the key ones, nail those, come in at a lower price, and that's how you compete. And it's exactly what Suunto did. They got incredible GPS accuracy, like really good multi-band accuracy. They've got good maps on there. They've got good training analysis. It's really like very much the Training Peaks style training analysis that's familiar to lots of people. And it's a watch that, it's not actually my personal style, but I can see it's a good looking watch. And some people like really like the look of it with that kind of like beveled like metal ring and a really, really, you know, rugged design at that lower price. So it's ticking a lot of key features and really good battery life as well, I think, both in terms of single use and day-to-day use. It is like going to do the job. So if you're looking for a really focused watch in all those key areas, which are my key areas, like I'm not so worried about the music and stuff like that, then it does it really well. And Suunto has started to really up the pace of its updates to improve things like the little bits of lag they had in the software, and in general just little complaints. There are certainly still complaints with the UI for sure. The way they do things like guided workouts is beyond me. I don't know why they do it like that, but it's all there, and it's now a really competitive price. Again, less competitive when you start looking at reduced Garmins, but you know, on RRP, it's the one that is offering tremendous value in this category. And it's just great to see a brand doing this, because I think we agree this is what you have to do. Like, until you can put the years of work Garmin has put into all these features to make them very easy to use and all their smarts and stuff, you've got to try and compete in other ways, and price is one of them.
It was a welcome return for Suunto, like a bit of a return to form in many ways. It's kind of brought them back into the equation. They desperately needed something, and I think with their, you know, this and the Race S, which is the smaller one, we should also say there is a titanium version of this, so you can go even more kind of premium materials if you want to, and a bit more durability and kind of rugged build if you want to sort of scale up for that. But they've definitely kind of reinserted themselves into the conversation in a way that I think is really commendable, and hopefully we're going to see more from them. So there you have it. That's been our deep dive into the best high-end watches, the premium watches, those top price watches that you can buy from all the brands. Hope you found it useful. Give us a like if so. If you're not already subbed to the channel, why not get stuck into that? If you're after a more affordable watch, I'm going to pop our guide to those sort of more wallet-friendly watches up on the channel right now. Go and take a look at that. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by, and until next time, happy running, people.